Of all the enemy factions in Bleach, there can be no doubt that the Espada are both the most famous and the most popular, presiding over the longest story arc in the series and being the primary enemies of the most popular part of Bleach. Bleach's apex of popularity was actually down to the Espada. Characters like Ulquiorra and Grimjo are absolutely synonymous with the series, and it was even reported that these characters caused the Arrancar arc to be longer than it was originally going to be, because they resonated so well with audiences. However, since the end of that arc, and indeed the end of the series, a lot of debate has raged over the Espada in general. Were they as threatening as they could have been? How effective were they as villains? And then there have been lots of debates actually focused on individual members of Aizen's top 10. One such debate that I want to look at in today's video is whether or not the first Espada, Coyote Starrk, was actually deserving of his rank. It's by no means a slight against the character. In fact, just some kind of clarification, Starrk is actually probably my favourite of the 10 Espada, but a lot of people have taken it upon themselves to question whether or not he really deserved that title based on a number of things. His fight with Kyoraku, and the abilities of the Espada who kind of came around him as well in terms of their ranks. Before we begin, however, guys, I'm literally less than 10 subs away from 900 subscribers at the time of recording this video, so be one of those 10 to help me get to that number, and let's keep pushing those milestones until we reach 1,000. And that would just be absolutely fantastic. Where to begin then on the topic of Starrk and whether or not he deserved to be the Primera Espada? I think you have to begin with the character himself. And Starrk is a very weird character to kind of talk about because he's very, very original in the Bleach universe. For a villain, and a villain of his stature certainly, he's actually considerably not very antagonistic. Of all the characters in Bleach, Starrk stands alone as being one of the only characters in the series to actively not care about the event that he's partaking in. By design, Starrk is quite an understated character. Despite his position as the first Espada, he's definitely supposed to come across as a bit of an underdog, especially when compared to characters like Barragan, who are definitely supposed to be the all-powerful ruler of the Espada. You're supposed to think that Barragan is going to be the number one. That's why when it turns out that Starrk is, it's supposed to subvert your expectations as to what makes a powerful character within this army. And even if his design is quite downbeat, that doesn't make him any less awesome. I think Starrk has probably one of the cooler designs in the series, and the fact that it's quite simple and plain, I say that in a good way, is actually really effective. In many respects, however, I see Starrk as the forgotten Espada. Despite his position as number one, he really does not show up a lot in this story, and his fights don't actually take that long either. Not only that, he doesn't get a volume cover, and he also is one of the only Espada, it's only him and Araniro, that don't face a single Bankai in the story. This is just one of a few reasons why people think that Starrk maybe didn't deserve his position at the top. When compared to Espada like Barragan and Ulquiorra, who have very flashy attacks, very flashy looking abilities, Starrk definitely comes across as, again, a bit downplayed. We've seen Ceros plenty of times before in the series, and sure, it's really cool that Starrk can wield them in ways that other characters can't, and yeah, having a couple of guns is pretty badass. But when you compare it to a skeleton with a crown who can rot people to the bone, it's definitely hard to kind of justify Starrk being that number one spot while Barragan is number two. Now obviously a lot of people have argued the fact that Barragan is actually meant to be number one and is only number two because Aizen put him there to insult him. I can see that and I completely understand that, but I feel that point of view is not doing Starrk as a character and a fighter justice. So despite his relatively short amount of panel time and his abilities being perhaps slightly less immediately impressive than say number two and number four, I want to argue now why I think Starrk actually does deserve his position at the top of the Espada's ranks, despite maybe not being the most memorable character or having the most memorable fights. So the main canon reason we have to go off for the ranking of the Espada is they are ranked by Reiatsu, and that's why we get the frankly rubbish twist about Yami being 0. But if we focus on Starrk, it's very clear that he has an abnormally large amount of Reiatsu compared to almost every other character in the series, I would say. Unlike every single other Arrancar, and that goes for Yami as well, Stark's Zanpakuto is not his power. His power split into an entirely second person. That's how much strength he has. Whether or not it was Starrk or Lilanet at first, Lilanet implies that it actually was her who was the original body. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that in their final form, she is his Zanpakuto. She is the source of his power, and no other Arrancar has that. Every other Arrancar was able to turn their Reiatsu into a blade, and of course we know from Bleach lore in general that the size of a Zanpakuto is relative to one's Reiatsu. Going off of that then, Starrk has managed to condense his Reiatsu into as small a form as it can be, and that's literally a human child. Not only that, but even when the two of them are split up, as we get to see in their flashback, just being around regular hollows is enough to kill them all. Their Reiatsu is clearly absolutely crushing for any hollow that's not particularly powerful. And we know for a fact as well that this doesn't extend to other characters. Barragan is seen in a court full of hollows, and none of them are getting killed. Moving on to Stark's battles, however, as I feel this is where the real meat of this argument comes in. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Stark is pretty much the only character in the series who doesn't care about the fight that he's a part of. We know Stark is very lazy, he's very apathetic, and he doesn't really have any ill will towards the Shinigami other than he wants to serve Aizen. But for pretty much the longest time in this fight, Stark is very clearly not trying. He says so himself, and despite the fact that Kyoraku is obviously trying to kill him at points, Stark never really retaliates in kind. This is incredibly unusual for a Bleach fight and a Bleach villain, especially a top tier Bleach villain as well, and it's actually really interesting to see. What's important here is to consider the caliber of opponent that Stark is up against, and how the fight plays out. Before we do that though, I just want to shift gears and jump over to Barragan. Now, unlike Stark, Barragan is all about the flash. This guy is opulent, he is powerful, and he knows it as well. That's the difference, is that he wants people to know that he is strong. When Barragan activates his release form Arrogante, we get a really, really badass moment where he manages to take Soifon's arm. It is scary. It's one of those moments that really stays with you as a reader. You're like, this guy should not be trifled with. The difference is, however, unlike Stark, Barragan is not consistent. Barragan's fight goes downhill from there on out. That is the best part of that fight, no questions asked. Stark, however, manages to maintain a level of consistent ass-whooping, and again, that's something I'll get into in a minute. So Barragan, while impressive on a surface level at least, and definitely having a cool and creative ability that does strike fear into his opponents, is not on the same level as Stark for a number of reasons. Firstly, Stark has a personality that is just not seen in the Arrancars. He's cool, he's calm, he's collected, but he's also incredibly intelligent and observant on a level that we just don't see in the series. He's able to observe the fact that Shunsui is actually ambidextrous and can use both of his hands, and therefore is clearly a dual wielder despite the fact that Shunsui is trying to hide that as best as he can. He's also able to discern exactly what Ukitake's Sogyo no Kotowari does after seeing it literally 3 times in action. You see, when it comes down to a fight, it's not just about the flashiness, it's about how well a character can compose themselves and hold themselves in a fight, and that will carry them through to the end. And Stark is able to do that incredibly well. He is pretty much never rattled, despite being played up for laughs a bit more than Barragan is, because Barragan is an all-serious character. Stark is deadly because of that. You know there is real power hiding beneath that kind of almost goofy facade. He's not really an Urahara/Askin character, but he is in that vein of characters who you know are incredibly powerful and are not really putting on their best face. So in the manga, Stark is obviously facing off against Kyoraku, who we know for a fact is one of the most powerful captains in the entire Gotei 13. In fact, he's the future Captain Commander. And here's something I really want to point out. From the start of this fight, all the way until Love and Rose turn up, Stark does not take a single hit. He doesn't get hit once, and that is crazy, especially when he's going up against both Ukitake and Kyoraku. In his resurrection, Stark is able to keep a level head and assess the situation, all while dodging every single attack both of these guys throw at him, and we know for a fact that Kyoraku fights dirty, and still Stark is pretty much dodging everything. So Stark's ability to control the battlefield with his Ceros and still simultaneously dodge everything these two very high-level Captain class characters can throw at him is already very impressive, but it doesn't stop there. After Kyoraku and Ukitake are taken out of the fight, Stark then comes up against Love and Rose. And if we just take a look at the suite of other fights going on at the moment, he clearly has the toughest fighters around. Hachi joins Barragan's fight, and by no means a pushover, but he is still technically a lieutenant class character, even if it is the Kido Corps. And meanwhile, Haribel gets both Lisa and Hiyori, again, 2 technically vice captain level characters who join Hitsugaya, who certainly at this point in the series is not the most powerful captain. Meanwhile, Love and Rose are the 2 characters to face off against Stark, 2 captain level characters who also have Hollow Mask powers, and they both use them in this fight. And I just want to stress again, Stark literally is toying with them the entire time. He's not even toying with them. You'd have to care about the fight to toy with them. He's just fighting, and nothing is really happening to him. Stark's emotional side comes out and he does get rattled by Barragan's death, and at that point he takes a hit from Love's cudgel, but it does absolutely nothing. Like, Stark lands on the floor and it's played up for laughs. He takes a full wallop of Love's Shikai and it basically does nothing to him. And after that, you all know where the fight goes. Stark finally turns up the heat and becomes quite impressive, even though I still don't think he fully invested in the fight at this point. But we do finally get to see his piece de resistance, and he summons his army of spirit wolves. And I think this is the moment where he really shines, and again, I think it's completely understated. These wolves totally decimate Love and Rose with ease, and bear in mind, Stark doesn't even move from his spot. You have to remember that Barragan, we're going to use Barragan because he is the closest example to Stark. He is the number 2 Espada. He is freaking out in his battle. Like, the moment he takes even a hit, he is losing his mind. And I think it's his personality as much as anything that holds him back. But Stark just remains completely in control the entire time. His wolves are just tearing Love and Rose apart, even with their hollow masks on. Both of them are in Shikai, both of them are Captain Class characters. And Stark just watches. But I know what you're thinking. Stark never fights a Bankai and is in fact killed by a Shikai. And yeah, that does sound really bad. The first Espada in Aizen's army killed by a Shikai? That is not impressive. However, if we take everything into account, bear in mind Stark was winning this fight with ease. He was in control of the entire battle from start to finish, didn't take a single hit, even going from Kyoraku no Kitake to Love and Rose. Stark was always at the top of his game. And he wasn't even trying. That's the major thing. But I wish Kubo had given us a chance to really see Stark in action. However, before Stark can finish off Love and Rose, he's stabbed through the back by Kyoraku. Now, this is the first time we really learn too much about Kyoraku's personality, especially in a fight scenario. And it turns out he's not afraid to fight dirty. And I really like that. I like a character who's not afraid to do whatever it takes to win. And I think it's quite telling that against an opponent like Stark, Shunsui felt the need to do this. He has to stab Stark through the back with an ability that Stark had absolutely no idea even existed. I think that there was no way Stark could have gotten out of this scenario, because it played perfectly into Kyoraku's hands, and even Love and Rose didn't expect it, because in the world of Bleach, it's really not the etiquette to come crashing someone else's fight, and that's exactly what Shunsui does. Love and Rose are very, very clearly outmatched, and Shunsui just stabs. He sees an opportunity and he stabs Stark in the back. That stab takes Stark out of the game. Like, and I'm not saying from a perspective of Stark is going to die from that stab, because he's obviously not. But from that point on, his head is not in the fight anymore. And it's just such an interesting personality for the series. Stark doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to fight. He gets a little bit riled up and absolutely decimates Love and Rose. And then when Shunsui is going to kill him, or is at least fighting on par with him, he's clocked out. And again, his death is quite understated. And I feel like Kubo moves on quite quickly from Stark, which doesn't help either. When Barragan dies, you get kind of a big moment about like his crown falling to the ground, and then Stark feels bad about him, so we move on to another fight. When Stark dies, however, that's kind of it for the Espada, and we move on to the main event. Aizen just wipes out Haribel in a couple of panels, and then Kubo kind of rushes us into the big battle royale with Aizen. And I feel like in that sense, Stark is almost kind of forgotten about. Like I said earlier, he does feel to me like the forgotten Espada, and for the Primera, that's a really sad state of affairs. Firstly, he definitely deserved a volume cover, but secondly, I would have loved to have seen him gone up against a Bankai, especially since he explicitly says he wants to the entire time. But I think it's a huge testament to Stark's strength and his worthiness of the rank of Primera that he goes up against four captain level Shikais and basically doesn't take a single hit until the end, where he gets blindsided by a stab in the back. Stark remains in control of that fight from beginning to end, displaying a litany of abilities and absolute mastery of the Sero. I love the way, especially in the anime, it does mention it in the manga, but I love it in the anime, how Stark is able to just instantly fire a Sero from anywhere on his body. That is complete mastery of that ability that no other character has, and it really catches Kyoraku off guard, and I love that. I think it's very clear that Stark is at least captain level, if not considerably higher. The fact that his Reiatsu is so enormous, he has to have an entire second person with him, but also just the way he's able to completely control the flow of that battle, to the point where he's able to analyse his opponents and not take a single hit, is hugely impressive. So there you have it. That's pretty much my video on Stark and why I feel he deserves the rank of the Primera Espada. I think a combination of his personality, his suite of abilities, and just the way he's able to completely control the fight, even against multiple high-ranking old captain characters, is very impressive, and considerably more impressive than pretty much anything the rest of the Espada do. I think the fact there's no big explosive Bankai reveal definitely takes away from Stark's fight a bit, and it does make it less memorable for people. I, for one, really don't like the fight with Soifon and Barragan, but I still remember it because Soifon activates her Bankai for the first time, and that's always going to be a spectacle. If you consider Katen Kyokotsu and Sogyo no Kotowari's actual ability reveals to be new reveals, which they are, Stark comes up against 4 brand new Shikai, which is pretty mad, and I think that deserves to be commended. So that's it for my discussion video, guys, on why I think Stark deserves to be the #1 Espada. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me. What do you think about Stark as a character? Do you think Barragan deserved to be #1 because of his Respirar ability? Or maybe Ulquiorra deserves the #1 spot because of his Segunda Etapa? Ulquiorra is a character I want to talk about a little bit more in another video, but for now, guys, this was my video on Stark. Let me know in the comments below if you liked it. Give the video a like, and as I said before, hit the subscribe button because we're so close to 900, and then we can move on to 1,000, and that'll be great. Alright guys, until next time, I'll catch you later. Goodbye.